From the top of the Snohomish County government headquarters, you can see one volcano and two mountain ranges, the Olympics and the Cascades. You can see the waters of Puget Sound, and in the distance, thick forest. In this part of the world, we live and die by our wilderness. We've got earthquakes, mudslides, and wildfires. Our landscape is prone to disaster. Now, Snohomish County is treating the opioid epidemic like a natural disaster. It's one of very few counties in the country that's treating it this way.
That's why we're here. In this episode, we're going to meet the county top dog and an old-school cop to understand the county's response to the opioid epidemic. We're going to learn what they're doing that's different and how it's working. So first, we start at the top. Dave Summers is the county executive. It's like a CEO, but he's elected. He sits in the scenic office at the top of county government.
Before he got here, Dave used to be a fish biologist. And before that, he was a marching band nerd.
I was a sousaphone player for tuba for 2 years. And then I did that for 2 years, and I was drum major for 3.
Nowadays, everyone is looking to him for direction. A lot like when he was a drum major, but harder.
Drum major, you just, went out there and looked good, put on a big hat and blew the whistle and, marched around. But it's a little bit tougher when you're dealing with things like the whole opioid addiction problem and homelessness. Those don't have quite as clear a path.
Summers' past prepared him in another way, too. He grew up scarred by his mother's struggle with alcohol.
Growing up with alcoholism, you're pins and needles all the time, and you really are afraid to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, and they'll often go off really for no reason, but you don't know that when especially you're a young person, you think, what am I doing wrong?
It was especially hard on his younger brother.
He struggled with drugs for many years, and he lived in tent cities for a while, really was on the edge, and there were people there to help him. And he was strong enough to say he wanted to help and change, and he's doing well now.
Dave's brother got the help he needed and made it out of a tent. But so many people in this county are still out there, living in the woods. So now, when Dave confronts the same issues of addiction and homelessness as the leader of the county, he knows the problem isn't bad people.
There's many paths for people to fall into addiction and homelessness, and they're good people. They are just folks that are broken for some reason, whether it's loss of a job, mental health issues, health issues.
During the interview, again and again, Dave says people with addiction are good people.
To me, it's humanized that I know the folks in my life that have struggled with this are really great people. And I'm very grateful when there's somebody there to help them, and I just want to be the same.
At the top of county government, literally the top of this building, this perspective on addiction is making a difference in how local government approaches the opioid epidemic. In Snohomish County, the policy from the top is to treat people as people, not the problem. To treat the disease, addiction, as a disease. And to treat rampant opioid addiction as an epidemic, like they would with any other disease. We're going to introduce you to a few other people who have helped shape this approach. And in this episode, we're talking about what a landslide can teach us about tackling the opioid epidemic.
But first, this is Finding Fixes, a podcast about solutions to the opioid epidemic around the U.S. This season, we're going to focus on Snohomish County, Washington. Population, about 760,000 people.
I'm Anna Boyko-Wyrock.
And I'm Kyle Norris. Anna is going to be your guide through this approach to solving the opioid epidemic. This episode is about how to get one of the clunkiest, most inefficient systems there is, government, to work in a life or death situation.
Yep. Oh, yeah. You set this stuff up, sister.
Our next stop is with the sheriff. Sheriff Ty Trineri is a presence. He's dressed in uniform and gives a big, firm handshake. He talks loud, shoots straight.
I want to know how you unwind.
bourbon. Teasing.
You can hear a woman in the background telling him he needs to drink more of it. We'll introduce her in a second. When the sheriff talks, he hits the table with a finger and leans in for emphasis. Ty tells us the story of how he experienced a dramatic turnaround. You see, before he was elected sheriff, Ty was the police chief of the town of Stanwood, a place with about 6,000 people.
I had a mom walk in the front door of the police department and basically said, "Chief, you have a heroin problem in your community." And I remember thinking, well, that's not possible. This is Stanwood, and heroin is in big cities, with homeless populations. It's not in rural America.
For decades, heroin was a big city problem. That changed in the past 10 to 20 years. Prescription pain pills and heroin became a rural, suburban, and urban problem. If you want to read the whole story, read the book Dreamland by Sam Quinones. It's really, really good. Back to the sheriff, though. Ty had no idea how vast the problem was. From pharmaceutical companies pushing drugs to people being overprescribed pain pills, getting addicted and becoming homeless, to teens experimenting with smoking heroin, to senior citizens accidentally overdosing on opioids. Ty would learn all that much later. Back then, he was more old school.
Every problem that I'd had could be solved with a pair of handcuffs and a trip to jail, right? That's just what we do. Go into a neighborhood where there's a problem house or a problem individual, work with the community. Ultimately, every solution ended with a pair of handcuffs and a trip to jail. And so I had to really understand what was causing the heroin problem to understand how a pair of handcuffs and a trip to jail weren't going to solve the issue.
Let's talk about that jail for a second. It was key to Ty's dramatic turnaround that I mentioned.
So now as the elected sheriff, I have a jail that I have not worked in. As a deputy, patrol deputy, I never went beyond basically that booking area. Fill out the paperwork, get my handcuffs back, go back out the door. So now as the sheriff, I want to see it all. I want to see, how do we handle laundry? How do we handle food? I don't know what I'd envisioned, but I certainly hadn't prepared myself for what I saw when I got to medical.
He toured his county jail, beyond the booking area. When he saw the medical ward, he was shocked.
As I'm being led into medical, I'm thinking about what an Everett clinic would look like, right? Or, a room of people that have varying issues going on, not a room overflowing with one problem, and that problem being detoxing from heroin.
Paint me just a quick visual. What did you see?
Very, very sick people, because detoxing from heroin is like having the worst possible stomach virus you can have. People are proned out. They're just suffering. And I just remember being overwhelmed by the fact that everybody in this area had one common problem.
It's a problem his go-to solution, a pair of handcuffs and trip to jail, wasn't going to solve. The county jail, his jail, was a de facto detox center, and it was overwhelmed. At any given time, around half the inmates were withdrawing from heroin. Some of them were so sick and weren't getting proper medical care, they were dying in jail. From 2010 to 2014, over a dozen inmates died.
It took becoming the sheriff to see the impacts inside the jail with heroin abuse, to see the impacts in the community across the entire county, for me to realize that we had to change a lot about what we were doing.
They have changed what they're doing. In the next few episodes, we're going to look at how law enforcement and the jail are running differently. But right now, we're staying with county leadership. Leadership that very recently faced a tremendous disaster. A local disaster that killed dozens of neighbors and friends. And it happened in minutes.
29425, SR 530 Northeast.
One of the deadliest landslides in American history.
I'm sending out one victim. Appears to be about a 6-month-old baby.
43 people died. It happened March 22nd, 2014 in Oso, Washington, about 30 miles from the county seat towards the mountains.
The road is flooded. Lines are down.
It would also carry some valuable lessons for the sheriff and the whole county.
A barn over roof has washed into the roadway.
On that day, first responders heard the highway was washed out. Houses were in the road.
When I was alerted Saturday morning that there was a mudslide, I thought, boy, that's a weird place for a mudslide.
We've got Highway 530 100% blocked. This is a major slide here.
Mud traveled more than half a mile and swallowed an entire neighborhood.
We were getting video from our helicopter that was up above. It still wasn't fathomable.
Oso is a tiny town in northwest Washington state. It's nestled next to the Cascade Mountains with thick, lush forests. When the disaster hit, the job of getting information out fell to Sherry Ireton. She's the director of communications for the sheriff's department. When the sheriff joked earlier about drinking bourbon to relax, Sherry was in the background teasing him that he needs to drink more. When we started researching this podcast, everyone said, you have to talk to Sherry. When we met her for the first time, we noticed Sherry carries 3 cell phones.
One is obviously my work-issued cell phone. One is the media line for the sheriff's office that reporters and news outlets can reach us 24/7. And the other one is my mom 24/7 line. It's my personal cell phone. So.
This whole idea we're talking about this episode, treating the opioid epidemic like a natural disaster, this whole approach originally started with her. She's done some national training in emergency response, and her idea was, what if the county used the system they used during the landslide to respond to the opioid epidemic? In a nutshell, get everyone working together on the same page, which is what she saw happen with the landslide. Back then, one of her responsibilities was taking reporters to see the mudslide. She ended up learning something too during those trips.
We came down the hill and I looked up and it was amazing to see Black Hawk helicopters flying with our helicopter and a fixed wing over the top of that, and all in coordination with each other, all with the same objective, which is life safety. We need to get folks off that pile and save them.
What if they used that system of tight coordination and communication, of everyone working together across government agencies? What if they used that system to tackle the opioid epidemic? County leaders took the idea and ran with it.
Good afternoon, and I want to thank you all for being here today.
On November 20th, 2017, Snohomish County Executive Dave Summers held a press conference and handed down an executive order. This was an emergency.
Hello. Yeah. And who are you?
Jason Bierman. I'm the Director of Emergency Management for Snohomish County.
Okay. And where are we standing?
So right now you're standing on the edge of the Snohomish County Emergency Coordination Center floor. This is the coordination center for the county.
It's a big room with maps and monitors and lots of desks, all in clusters. There's a big sign that says, "What do you know and who needs to know it?" Kyle and I paid them a visit to see what this emergency response looks like on the ground. The county is using this room and an emergency coordination approach to respond to the opioid crisis. And we talked to Jason Bierman. He's the guy in charge of the county's response to any number of things that might go wrong here.
Earthquakes, we have a volcano here, we have flooding, windstorms. We are susceptible a bit to tsunami and Seiche, what's called an inland tsunami.
The volcano you're talking about, Baker or Rainier?
Glacier Peak. But we have a volcano just east of here, so.
I didn't even know that I should be afraid of that volcano. Yeah, Glacier Peak. Turns out it's a big volcano. So say Glacier Peak were to blow. County workers would flock to this building where we're standing, and this room would come to life.
This technology sits here. It's ready to go. It literally is flicking the mouse and turning on the monitors.
And in an emergency, like an eruption or an earthquake, all the different agencies responding to the crisis would come together. The representatives would have a meeting every 6 to 12 hours and debrief. Remember, the opioid epidemic is a slow-moving emergency. So as they prepare to respond to this crisis like a natural disaster, they have meetings every 2 weeks. People from all over city and county government show up. From the fire department, waste management, human services, public health, the sheriff's office, and local cities. The technical name for this group is the Multi-Agency Coordination Group, or MAC Group. It comes from FEMA's Emergency Response Playbook. Everyone sits around a few tables. They talk through PowerPoint slides.
610 is completed.
It is.
Yeah.
Great.
It's like they're speaking a secret language.
I think 7.5 is kind of...
They throw out numbers like 610 and 7.5. The numbers refer to items on their to-do list. There are 7 big goals, like Goal 1, reduce opioid misuse and abuse, or Goal 5, reduce collateral damage to the communities. I'm not going to go through every single one, but broad strokes here. Each goal is broken down into a ton of smaller pieces, smaller objectives, like training schools to prevent addiction, reaching out to homeless people and giving them services, training senior citizens to dispose of prescription pain pills. They span across segments of society. When you print out all these goals and objectives on paper, they stretch 6 pages in teeny tiny font.
Some of these goals are really long term. I mean, they're going to take years, decades.
That's Sherry Ireton again, the Sheriff's Director of Communications. She is also the spokesperson for this group that represents so many branches of local government. Sherry has lots of cell phones and wears lots of hats. Sherry says the key to this approach is that you have to be realistic.
So if you set an objective for yourself to just end the opioid epidemic, you're probably never going to be successful. By breaking it down, it's like eating an elephant. You just can eat one piece at a time, breaking it down into a piece that you can actually digest.
This is actually one of the principles of the emergency management approach. Not eating elephants, but breaking goals into smaller pieces. These bite-sized pieces have to be achievable. They have to have a deadline, and you have to be able to measure the success. So a good objective isn't end the opioid epidemic, but, for example, connect 288 inmates to drug treatment when they're released from jail. Or distribute 500 bags that you can lock shut with a key for people to secure their prescription pills. Some things that sound really simple on paper are much harder to pull off.
You know, like the needle cleanup. I think that was a really interesting objective to accomplish.
Say you find a needle, a syringe for injecting drugs, in your flower bed. How do you get rid of it?
Before we tackle this objective, it was really against county code to just drop off even a pop bottle with a needle in it at a disposal. You can just toss it in your garbage. We have places now across the county that people can take and dispose of the sharps disposal containers. That was a collaboration with the Health District, Public Works, and Solid Waste Division, and partnering with some of the law enforcement and community agencies across the county to make that available.
That's why you need all these agencies in a room together to help undo some of their own red tape.
Yeah. It's kind of getting out of our own way, I guess, sometimes.
Let's get down to brass tacks. I love that expression. How is this approach working for the county? Is it more efficient? More effective? Here are a few numbers. Snohomish County laid out the plan in November 2017. By Memorial Day 2018, they completed 36 objectives. A few months later, they were up to 58. These objectives include things like training schools to prevent addiction, figuring out how to refer people who overdosed to treatment, and help people in treatment get subsidized bus cards so they can move on with life more quickly. In the process, the county has hit a few snags, though. A big one is funding. Another is bureaucracy. As much as they want to get rid of their own red tape at the county level, not everything is up to them. There's also state government, the federal government. There are so many more layers of government. And even if you forget those other layers for a second, they have enough on their plate that they can do. Their to-do list just keeps getting longer. Over 9 months, it almost tripled in size. They keep adding new objectives all the time, including getting pharmacists and state legislators more involved. They can hardly update their website to keep up with these changes. So I gotta point out this. This is one way the opioid epidemic is totally different from a landslide. the opioid epidemic keeps going. Snohomish County Executive Dave Summers again.
Oso mudslide was horrific and was extremely intense in a small area, affected several communities, and obviously a number of folks lost their lives and lives were disrupted. But there was a beginning and there's kind of an end. The opioid crisis just keeps rolling on. And it's so pervasive. It's in our urban areas, it's in our rural areas. Every walk of life and every family can be touched by this, so nobody's immune.
We're going to pivot now. So all that stuff we just heard about the county and its response, well, let's remember that at the heart of everything that they're doing is people. And for the next few minutes, we're going to focus on just two people. The same day those government officials met, figuring out big plans for the county, Hallie and Monty were figuring out much smaller plans.
7:30.
No, it's in Marysville. It starts at 7.
Which NA meeting they were going to go to.
But
No, it's at 7 p.m. Monday by the book, 7 p.m.
we're going to the one at 7:30, the California Street one.
We're following Hallie Martin and Monty McGarry throughout this series. They're a couple in their early 20s who decided to stop using heroin on Valentine's Day, 2018. Today is day 33 of no drugs.
Monday through Friday I work. I'm a carpenter. So I'll go to work and then I'll come home, take a shower. We'll usually get coffee and then go to a meeting.
Narcotics Anonymous and Starbucks are daily stops in equal measure.
I kind of like the blackberry. It tastes like real blackberry, though. Taste it.
Hallie buys them blackberry and raspberry Red Bull Italian sodas, banana bread, and poppy seed cake. Monty's got dirty blonde hair and a short, scruffy beard. He usually wears a baseball cap and a hoodie. The word love is tattooed on his knuckles. He says to remind him how to act.
You know, like if I'm feeling not loving, then I can look at my hand. And I was thinking about putting life over here too. Like just, because life is very meaningful to me right now. And tattoos hurt really bad.
Monty started on opiates at age 12.
Like I always felt like I was missing something in my life. And then the reason why I think I became an addict is because like once I tried drugs, it made me feel whole.
Like a lot of people, the roots of his addiction stem back to being abused as a child, he says. Monty says he's been saved from overdoses on different occasions by his dad and 2 girlfriends, including Hallie. Now, he's working hard to stay away from drugs. Monty's daily struggle looks like this.
In my head, I talk terrible to myself. Like in my addiction, I have told myself I'm not good enough, and like that's been my thought. So like throughout the day, the times that I want to use is like when I self-talk in a negative way. And so I have to be mindful and like watch what I'm saying to myself because it's not true.
Sitting across from him at the table, Hallie is also struggling.
I think that everybody, when they get clean, they feel kind of like lost. Like they're like, wow, what do I do now? And like, I just get overwhelmed.
Hallie and Monty have other struggles too. Court cases and housing. Hallie and Monty can tell you which local jails have better food and nicer people, from personal experience as inmates. When we first meet them, they've been living at a hotel, looking for a room to rent. Still, Monty is driven. Sipping his Italian soda, he says his goals push him forward.
I don't know. I just want to live today. And I want things out of life. And like my goal in life is to have a family and I don't know, the white picket fence. Like maybe buy a piece of property, build a house, and have kids, dogs, you know, all that. Just like a normal, even though I don't know how normal life really is. I just want a boring, normal life. Like I don't want all that chaos in my life anymore.
These two people are really trying. The county is really trying. And for all of them, it's a long road ahead. But we've reached the end of this episode. To recap, we explored how using natural disaster response as a playbook can help a county deal with opioids. We also heard how the leaders of Snohomish County are approaching the epidemic from a standpoint of compassion instead of punishment. Changing the way you think about people with addiction can change your approach in big ways. County Executive Dave Summers again.
A lot of people just think the only way to solve this is to arrest people. Drug use is illegal, just arrest them. Well, we know that doesn't work, so we're changing the game.
Just how are they changing the game? From here, we'll break down what they're doing differently. Over the next few episodes, we'll look at how cops and jails are being reworked to help people with addiction.
They open doors for people, and it just matters if you want to walk through it. Once they opened that door for me, I ran through it. I didn't walk through it. I was tired of living that kind of life.
Thanks so much for listening. Finding Fixes is a project of Investigate West, a nonprofit journalism organization working in the public interest. Our team includes Anna Boyko-Wyrock, me, Kyle Norris, and Julia Drachman, with help from Paul Kiefer. Elisa Barba is our editor. Joan Kane is our fairy godmother. Music by Jake Weholt and Josh Woodward. Photos by Leah Nash. You can find us on social media and online at findingfixes.com. Leave us a review on iTunes. Send us a message at fixes@findingfixes.com.